Hello, class. I'm going to get you started on designing a two-page spread normally used in magazines. So here's an example of a two-page spread in a magazine. You'll notice that the text is all in columns. And most of the time, objects in a spread don't really cross over the columns unless it's an image and it takes up two of the columns. Like this image, for example, takes up two of the columns. This image stretches across all three columns. This text, this call out, is actually using a little bit more than a column and a half. It's breaking the column, but there's rules for that. So I'm going to show you from the link that I put in your assignment, and we're just going to review how the columns work. So I'm going to screen share. All right, so you have a link to this page. This is from Cooper Union, and it's a guide to columns. Picas are an old-fashioned, or at least I think they're old-fashioned measuring unit. You'll see them sometimes on, well, if you open up InDesign or Illustrator, sometimes they'll give you an option for picas to measure things. So basically, this is a two-page spread, and it's broken into a three-column system. You'll notice that there's a 1/4 inch between the columns so that the text obviously doesn't touch each other, and then you're going to have a 1/2 inch all the way around. Now, you'll see in the specifications for your homework that we're going to be setting up your spread just like this. So 3 columns on one side, 3 columns on the other. So here's an example of a layout. You'll notice the image and the caption is within one column. This text is in another column. This text is in another column, so it's not breaking through. The graphic arts headline here is not breaking. Now we go over to the other page on the right-hand page. You've got a large image, which is crossing over the 2 columns, which works. It would work not as well if this image didn't cover all 2 columns. You want to try to keep things between, not to halfway crossover. Okay, you want to try to use up the columns. Now up here you have a call out, as you saw in the magazine I showed you before, and even though there's space around it, I would say this is taking up the space of the entire 2 columns because we can count that white space, right? Because we're not crossing anything else over here, so I think it works well. Now you'll notice that they use a hang line, that's what they call it, where everything is kind of following along this horizontal line, which gives it a nice put together look, so everything's at the same height. Okay, here it is laid out without all the grid. You can see how well it works, right? This seems familiar from magazines you've looked at, I am sure. So here's another alternative here. And again, it's the same system, the 3 columns. Now you've got this, this photograph, more or less, that's showing one of these old manuscripts. And it has a little example of the old-fashioned wood press type, which is kind of one image, right? So I would count this as one image, and it's crossing over the 3 columns, even though it looks like it's crossing over, but we can make an exception in that case. Again, we have graphic arts, which is kind of a call out like we had on the previous page, but there's enough white space around it that we could call this 2 columns. Now, the hang line on this is kind of up and down, which is another design choice that works. If we go here to, we can see it without the grid, right? That's working quite nicely. And here's yet another layout. We've got, again, the 3 column system. Now, everything is fitting nicely into the columns here, respecting all the grid, with the exception of this printing in Germany. We can make an exception. If it were me, I might have hit that P right on that other line just to make it, even, but that's me. I like everything to line up, but it still works. Still a rule worthy of breaking. Okay, here it is without the grid, so you can see how nicely it looks. And here is another layout, and you'll notice that we're breaking the grid over here on the top, on the right, and you can see that this isn't going to work as well because they are breaking the grid. They're carrying on with the hang line here, which is nice, and they actually put a rule. But I would say this this page over on the right is not working as well as it could have if this was laid out a little differently following the grid. And you'll see it here. Doesn't seem as conducive as it could. The reason why you can kind of get away with it is they've lined up the smaller image with the bottom image, and they're almost following a 2-column rule here on this side, because this image and this caption are kind of lining up. So even though it shows a 2-grid, a 3-column, it's really looking at a double column. If you take that away, you can kind of see there's a double column there. Here's yet another layout of similar content. We're using the 3-column system, and you're breaking an image over 2 columns over the gutter. Always be careful when doing this, because it's never going to line up perfectly. If you look in the inside of a magazine, things get lost in that gutter. It's never going to line up perfectly, but it can be a very nice effect if you want to cross an image over both pages of a spread, 2 pages called a spread. Here we're using, we're crossing the text over, again, over the entire spread, bringing it over here into the middle column of the right page. And we've got this image kind of hanging over and intersecting with this other figure image. And again, because the white space is kind of not trapped in the middle, it's facing outward, you can kind of get away with it. And it works well. Okay, and here it is without the grid, working pretty well. So these are some examples of how you can take the same content and lay it out in different ways. So look through this and study it and take a look, and more details will be in the post. Okay, so good luck. I look forward to seeing your designs.